Of course, I greatly support Walter Fust's comment that we're at the start of this, and you have to start somewhere with the data that you have and the plausible methodology. And of course, what we're looking for is better data for the future. But I do think it's incredibly important that this report was published now in advance of Copenhagen, because we are still in that state where people are not recognising what the impact on people is, and especially poor people now. If we are going to have a deal in Copenhagen where the money comes forward for adaptation and the money comes forward urgently and quickly, then people have to understand that the people out there, the poor people who are mainly on the receiving end of this, are suffering now, and they need that money now for adaptation. So I think it has to be done now, it has to be improved, it has to be worked on. But if anything, all the climate predictions that keep coming out are usually more optimistic than it gradually is turning out to be the case as we get more data.
How helpful do you believe this has been, given that this is talking about human impact, the kind of things you are addressing day after day at Oxfam GP?
Yeah, well, I think we still have a long way to go in getting the world to face up to the human impact. And for me particularly, one of the key issues is about how poor people themselves can understand what's happening to them. Now, we had a very good discussion about weather data itself, but of course poor people also need to understand what climate change is all about. And so many poor people recognise that the seasons are changing. Many of you will travel in the way I do, and poor people, certainly in rural areas, always say the seasons are changing, we don't understand what's happening to us. They also need to have that explanation about climate change, because in order for them to make the best decisions for their lives about how to adapt, they need to know why this is happening and the fact that this is going to be incredibly uncertain for them in now and in future years. And we need to work alongside them to help them develop the resilience that they'll need in the face of often great uncertainty about what is happening to their seasons locally. So it's very important that this understanding spreads across the world. A final comment from me on that. From Oxfam's point of view, we're running climate hearings now in 17 countries across the world with our local partners. Both to explain more about climate change, but also have local people tell their local and national governments what they're experiencing and what they expect their governments to do when they hit Copenhagen. And that's incredibly important. We've had 25,000 people already in Bangladesh at climate hearings, and we need that sort of thing to happen right across the world to put the pressure on for Copenhagen.
Before I go to Margaret Chan, just for a few other remarks, can I just ask both of you, do you fear, again I'm quoting from the executive summary, you want to steer the debate towards urgent action to overcome this challenge and reduce the suffering it causes? That's a central aim of this report and why you put it into the public domain. At any point, do you fear you may have overcooked the argument and therefore made it more difficult to do exactly what you're trying to achieve, which is to steer the debate towards urgent action?
Steering the debate is one thing. First, there has to be a debate on the social dimension of climate change. And we want to influence that debate. And that is what we do and what we are going to do by addressing those issues, be it related to climate displaced people, be it related to health or all the other issues. Those are absolutely center for defining the human impact of climate change as alluded in the report.
And Barbara Stocking, do you believe that the reaction to this report has in any way diminished that intention to steer the debate towards urgent action?
Not at all. Most reasonable commentary, and I think about the economists and so on, will say that yes, it's very difficult with the methodology, difficult with the data and so on, but are not actually saying, therefore, that you should ignore this report. What they're saying is, we know something is happening to people. This is, as it says, a plausible methodology, not the absolute, but we have to have that, and we have to get started somewhere. So no, I don't think that at all.
Right, let's broaden it out. Margaret Chan, your reflections on the Human Impact Report.
Well, Nik, I'm very used to controversies and debates about figures and estimates. Estimates being what it is, you know, we do need to accept there is always a range, within that range, whether it is possible. Now, I don't think that sort of criticism or controversy will diminish the importance of the debate. If anything at all, the data, the evidence coming out last year is very clear that the impact of climate change it was underestimated. And let me put it to you, climate change has very important impact on several what we call social and environmental determinants of health. Look at its impact on air, on water, and on food. If you put them together, the problems are huge. Now, why are we not getting good statistics and figures? It's because this problem has been neglected. As I said earlier, I mean, we should have done this years ago. And the climate change agenda and the discussion has been going on for years. It is only until recent years that political leaders, scientists are really focused, and we are coming to a head. In a way, it is a good start. We need to go to Copenhagen with vigorous debate and look at the data and see what can be done. And Coffee, let me put it again. You know, the human face, the health impact of climate change is extremely important, and I welcome this forum. You're putting the appropriate focus and the appropriate emphasis on climate change and its impact to human.
Let me ask, is there anyone out there who'd like to come back on the methodology? If you're sitting right at the back, somewhere in the middle, I can't see any hands going up at the moment. This is the moment if you want to come back. Please, yes. We're going to run this until about 11 o'clock. That's not to end the debate, but what I want to do is sample the debate as robustly as we can, please, and introduce yourself.
Andrew Watkinson, Director of Living with Environmental Change from the UK and a former Director of the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research. I would just like to say, in relation to the extent to which the scientists have debated this issue, and say that IPCC did not debate this, that is not the case. I was involved with the IPCC assessment, and there was extensive debate within the various chapters, particularly in Working Group 2. And when you look at the debates over agriculture, over health, and over in a number of other sectors, the general conclusion was that the data were just not robust enough to make any general conclusions about the impacts of climate change on humanitarian aspects of the issue. And it does concern me that the report, although I buy into most of what the report says, the numbers are incredibly suspect and are open to very severe challenge. And I think it would have been helpful if the report had recognized the fact that those results can be challenged, and there are a number of other ways of producing these data which might have produced much lower numbers.
That is exactly what we also try to do with the report. Now others should come forward to bring the evidence whether these figures are too high or too low. If I take the report, Search for Shelter, that appeared 2 weeks after our report on the climate displaced people, they went double as high. And they proposed and they exposed the scientifically proven figures. So I'm wondering why then these other figures chosen by another methodology are not at least a reference point we can talk about. And the most wonderful thing would be if the figures we came forward with in reality would be lower. Then we would have a fantastic positive response, but we are afraid, and many scientists told us they are afraid that we are too low with our figures.
Barbara Stocking, the idea that actually the figures are too high and their projections are lower.
Well, in the end, this sort of doesn't matter, because we have to be prepared for this. Certainly as a humanitarian agency, seeing the data just on the number of extreme weather events, whether or not climate related, but the increase in extreme weather events, we know that we have to prepare not only ourselves but local NGOs, local government, disaster risk reduction in communities to be ready for this, because there's something happening and we need to make sure that people are prepared for more of it. Similarly on adaptation, we hear all the stories day to day about how people are having to change their farming and so on. So whether the figures are precisely right or not, and they almost certainly are not precisely right, then it doesn't matter. We have to get on and prepare for this. But equally, we must get this into the debate before Copenhagen. As Margaret said, we can't just be talking about polar bears.